We are looking at a fast approaching deadline that could trigger one of the biggest hunger crises the U.S. has seen in generations. As a government shutdown drags on, a vital safety net for millions of Americans is about to just disappear. So, to really get a handle on what's at stake here, the human stakes, we've got to talk numbers. We are talking about roughly 42 million people. That's about 1 in every 10 Americans who are now facing the loss of their food benefits. And for people like Cherie, a 66-year-old widow from Pennsylvania, this is not some abstract political debate happening miles away. Her budget is really already a tightrope walk. Losing the food aid that her disabled nephew receives means she's facing an impossible choice: heat her home or put food on the table. And yeah, Cherie is absolutely not alone. That number, 42 million, just let that sink in. It really shows you the staggering scale of this potential crisis. To put it in perspective, that's more than the entire population of California. And the clock is absolutely ticking. The government shutdown was on October 1st, and with federal funding drawing up, states started sending out formal warnings in the last week of October. Now all eyes are on November 1st. That's the day when the nation's largest anti-hunger program is expected to effectively run out of money. And look, these are not just numbers on a spreadsheet. When Simone Wilkes, a mom of 2 in Detroit, got the official notice on her phone, she had an anxiety attack. That's real. For millions of families, the threat of losing this support is causing profound immediate panic. That kind of panic, it really highlights just how vital this program is, right? So, exactly what is SNAP and how does it even work? Okay, so SNAP stands for the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, but you probably know it as food stamps. Its roots actually go all the way back to the Great Depression. It's a 100% federally funded program, and the way it works is that it gives families a monthly amount on something called an EBT card. It works just like a debit card, but to buy groceries. And you know, it's so important to understand who this program actually helps. When you look at the data, the vast majority of people who get SNAP benefits are kids, working families, seniors, veterans, and people with disabilities. This really cuts through a lot of the common myths you hear about those who rely on this kind of help. Alright, this slide right here, this gets to the absolute core of the problem. It's a math problem, really. It cost about $8.1 billion to fund SNAP for a single month across the whole country. Now the USDA, they have an emergency fund, but it's only got about $6 billion in it. So you see the issue, right? It leaves this massive shortfall, and the agency is basically saying, we just can't cover it. So how in the world did we get here? Well, the answer lies in a political deadlock in Washington that has pretty much grounded the entire government to a halt. The government shut down because Congress just couldn't agree on a funding bill. And the main sticking point, it's a big dispute over the healthcare policy. One side, the Democrats, are saying they won't vote for a funding bill unless it includes an extension of subsidies for the Affordable Care Act. You know, the ones that help millions of people afford health insurance. On the other side, Republicans are saying, hey, Democrats are holding government funding hostage over an issue that we should be debating separately. And speaking to the media, House Minority Whip Catherine Clark, she acknowledged the hardship this would cause, but really framed it as a necessary point of leverage. She said that Democrats have tried to negotiate on this health care affordability, but have been met with an absolute refusal from Republicans. In response, you have Iowa's Republican delegation, and they're not alone in this party, placing the blame squarely on the Democrats. They're pointing out that Republicans have voted more than a dozen times to reopen the government and are accusing Democrats of, using vulnerable families as political pawns in this negotiation. Okay, so this crisis goes far beyond the 42 million people who get the benefits. The sudden disappearance of over $8 billion a month would send shockwaves through the entire country. And this one statistic, it just puts the sheer scale of this program into perspective. For every single meal a food bank provides, SNAP provides 9. 9. The entire charitable food system in America is just dwarfed by SNAP. It's a critical pillar of the nation's food security. Which of course leads to the most urgent question of all: if the federal government steps back, can our charities and food banks step in and fill the massive void? And the answer you're hearing from the food bank directors all across the country is a loud and definite no. There's just no way. They're already spending their absolute limits, spending way, way more than they did before the pandemic because of inflation and just rising demand. And get this, many of them are facing their own federal funding cuts. They just do not have the capacity to replace a multi-billion-dollar federal program. It's just not possible. And the impact goes beyond just hunger. Those SNAP dollars, they get spent directly in local economies at over 250,000 grocery stores, corner markets, farmers markets, you name it. That money supports local farmers and retailers, so pulling it out of the system would just be a major economic blow to communities all across the country. So with the deadline just days away and no solution coming out of Washington, states, communities, and families, well, they're being forced to scramble and prepare for the worst. State governments are basically shifting into emergency mode. We're seeing official warnings go out to millions of people. Leaders are dusting off their old pandemic-era response plans, and California has even said it might need to deploy the National Guard to help out with overwhelmed food banks. And at the same time, more than a dozen states have already had to stop taking new applications, which cuts off that lifeline for some people that can't even get to it. But while some states are mobilizing whatever resources they can, many have made it crystal clear they can't or won't fill this federal funding gap. Officials in places like Ohio and Tennessee have basically said they are not going to use rainy day funds for things like this. They argue those accounts aren't designed for this kind of thing, and that ultimately this is a problem that has to be solved in Washington. And so, as the clock counts down to November 1st, this is a huge unanswered question facing the entire country. We have created a political stalemate that has created a humanitarian cliff. And honestly, without some kind of last-minute breakthrough, we are all about to find out what happens when a safety net that supports 1 in 10 Americans just vanishes overnight.